Let's take a closer look at what we're seeing in the energy market at the moment with the focus on oil. Vandana Hari joining us from Vanda Insights. Vandana, welcome back. Good to see you. Of course, we look past the Middle East turmoil, which has now been referred to, of course, by Donald Trump as the 12-day war. And what an amazing move we saw in the oil price. How do you describe what you saw?
Yeah, good morning, Andrew. So crude has snapped right back to its pre-war comfort zone, shall I call it, roughly $64 to $68 for Brent, which I would say was the equilibrium price, taking into account on the supply side, OPEC Plus accelerating the return of its 2.2 million barrels per day of cuts. And on the demand side, the big economic picture, of course, components of that being the tariff wars, inflation, what the US Fed is doing. Put all of that into a box, shake it up, and the market decided that what you got was roughly $64 to $68 per Brent. To your question, should we be surprised at it jumping from 66 to 78 and straight back within a period of about 12 days or so? No. So even within that 12-day period, Andrew, if you notice, even with some of the worst case scenarios of oil supply shock being discussed and speculated, the market appeared reluctant to pack in too much of a geopolitical risk premium. So long story short, the wider, broader fundamental narrative for this year, plenty of supply, sluggish demand growth, that prevails.
What influence is the weakening US dollar having on the oil price?
So I think it's more a correlation and not a causation. I have looked at a US dollar oil correlationship through the previous decades. There used to be a causation factor in terms of an inverse correlationship. So every time US dollar strengthened, essentially that meant oil became dearer for the consumers, especially if their currencies were weakening against the greenback and vice versa. I would say that relationship has been broken more often than not, at least over the past 4 or 5 years, and it remains broken today. So just because the US dollar is under pressure, I think close to 3-year lows, right? It's not going to push up oil prices. I think oil prices are much more under the influence of the broader fundamentals narrative that I was talking about earlier.
And in terms of policy, particularly from the larger producer of OPEC Plus, what can we expect? What's ahead?
So nothing changes as a result of this Iran-Israel war. I think OPEC Plus, I expect the group of 8 that are unwinding their 2.2 million barrels per day of cuts to continue accelerating those. So just to remind ourselves, originally, earlier this year, they had planned that they would bring that oil back very gradually to the market to avoid tipping it suddenly into a very big surplus situation. And they pivoted on that policy and decided that they were going to do it much faster. So instead of 18 months that they had planned, now it looks like they're probably going to bring all of that 2.2 million barrels per day back in about 6 months or even less. That has more to do with the internal dynamics of the group to preserve cohesion against persistent quota busting by 2 or 3 members, specifically Kazakhstan, which has said quite openly, I'm sure within the group, because it has certainly said so in the public domain, that it is simply unable to rein in its production. So it's all about preserving the solidarity within the group. So the next decision for August production policy is expected on the 6th of July. I expect they will say, let's bring back another 411,000 barrels per day back into the market.